Okay, we're here today, this evening, to celebrate 50 years since the Bristol Bus Boycott. As a proud member of Unite Against Fascism, as well as the National Union of Teachers, I am very happy to present and chair this event. With regards to this evening, I just want to say that we must recognise that we are in the presence of living legends here, okay? For those of you who already know who those living legends are, some of you may not know, okay? So with regards to the 1963 campaign team, for those of you who don't know, we've got Paul Stevenson, okay? We've got Guy Bailey, and we've got Roy Hackett as well. Okay, we must also recognise the changes that unions have made to further equality in society. And so we've got Nigel Costley, okay, from the TUC, Southwest Secretary, and we've also got Rita Joyner from Unite speaking as well. And ladies and gentlemen, let's not also forget the hard work that Unite Against Fascism has done throughout the years and is currently doing. And we've got on the platform Wayman Bennett, who's the Joint Secretary of Unite Against Fascism. Okay, before I hand over to the speakers, I hope that you gain a lot from this event. Okay, the first speaker that's going to be speaking is Madge Dresser. Some of you may have seen her piece, okay? It's been republished, and for many of you who don't know who she is, she's going to be talking in just a minute. And also, this is just £3. Also, what I'd like to advertise is an event that's going to be happening at M-Shed about women, slavery and the resistance in the Caribbean. So that's also been advertised over there as well. So over to Lisa.
Right, thank you very much, Lisa. Well, thank you all for coming today. Thank who has really masterminded the republication of this pamphlet of Black and White on the Buses. But I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank again the people who were so instrumental in making the bus boycott happen. Paul Stevenson, Roy Hackett, Guy Bailey are here. And I guess we're all becoming historical artifacts in our own respective way, because it's been 50 years now to mark this occasion, and 30 years really since the pamphlet was first published, and that was the first time a narrative was established. And I outline in the new publication the kind of history of the pamphlet, which has had a bit of a life of its own, because before then, really, we were at a time in the 1980s when trade unions were under attack. Racism was rife, and people weren't all that interested in black history. It was only the beginnings of black history. And I was very worried that the story of the Bristol Bus Boycott from '63 would be forgotten, and and I was very intrigued to really try to get behind and not just do a celebratory history, but to look at the dynamics between white workers and black workers and look at all the contradictory aspects of it. So I've tried to do an honest account, but the nice thing about it is that it embedded in people's historical memory this really important event, which I think it's a testament to the enduring human interest of this story, that the pamphlet's been republished, but also that there's been so much public interest in hearing about what the people like Paul Stevenson, Roy Hackett, and Guy Bailey were able to do in the face of opposition in the 1960s. And it's also a mark of the maturity of the trade union movement today, that it's much more reflective about the way that ethnicity and class interact. When I first started to write, there was a kind of consent or defensiveness within the trade union movement about looking at the way ethnicity and racial prejudice might have motivated some of their workers. And I think it's a real testament to the movement that they are acknowledging it now. So thank you very much. So over to our next speaker.
Okay, so as I've introduced them, the team of 1965, 63 even. Paul Stevenson, Roy Hackett, as well as Guy Bailey are going to be speaking, but Paul Stevenson will speak first.
Thank you. Can I sit down? Okay. Right. Well, it's very pleasing to see so many of you here. And also Madge, because if it wasn't for Madge, I would have probably been inspired to write my own account of why I led the Bristol Bus dispute. As you say, Madge, we say Bristol Bus Boycott. I think we're thinking 50 years ago. I never knew I'd be around. And it's interesting to know that quite a number of people who I meet on the roadway, in the communities, vividly remember stands Roy, myself, and Guy Bailey made in bringing to attention the racism that existed in Bristol at the time. 50 years ago, if you were a person of colour, I mean ethnic minority, black and ethnic minority, you couldn't become a policeman. You couldn't become a firefighter. You couldn't become a senior teacher in a school. You couldn't become a landlord. You couldn't become a head teacher. You could become a cleaner. You could become a person who's looking after a job with no future. Black people were seen as below white people. And it was after the war, when the Americans went home, that they were clearly uneasy about the way the African Americans were being treated. I was born and bred in Britain. I was brought up during the evacuation in Essex, in the country, rural Essex. I also felt very much being alone. I was the only black child for hundreds, or literally, when we say hundreds, but for tens of miles around. I never saw another black person like myself for years. My mother joined the army to fight Hitler's fascism. She would come down to see me. The people of Dunmow, Essex, where I was living with a group of other children, found it strange to see a black woman in army uniform, in British Army uniform. I often retell the story during the time of rationing, of course, how I went into a butcher shop. I must have been about 2 or 3. And I saw this very large white woman glaring at me and saying to the butcher, who was sharpening his knife, I could eat him. Well, I thought to myself, God, that's what's happened to all the black children. That's why I don't see them. They eat them. I remember the name of the butcher shop was Dewhurst. Bristol was a different kind of game. Bristol had a clear feeling that black people were inferior and they should make no demands on the system. It was because of Martin Luther King fighting and boycotting, going to jail, being bitten by dogs, all for no other reason than he had a different colour skin. Which made me feel, well, what's happening in England? What's happening in England? When after the war, I came out to live in Newham. Now in Newham, I found myself the only black child throughout my secondary schooling in Newham. I didn't see any black person at all throughout my education. In the school, I was the only black person. So Newham, we wanted to see Newham when it was not multiracial. You should see it in 1947 to today, the 50 year. We have an enormous duty to bear on what's happening to our own children. There's a danger that they may become complacent. What's happening in Greece is frightening. Anyone who said that racism and fascism don't exist any longer, we've got an EU, we're going to have another thing coming. Racism is on the march. We have not defeated it. It will not be defeated unless we ourselves defeat it. It is one of the worst human rights issues that concern us all. None of us as individuals cannot say that they will not be either faced with racism or a victim of it. England went to war and helped to defeat the fascist forces of Europe. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren that they will not have to live in a society where human beings are treated like trash. Greece is a good example. It's not that it's surprising. What it was surprising is that the Greek political classes did nothing to stop what was to come. Anyone could have told them. The police were involved in the structure of Greece's racism. So I would just say, ending up, I have a book which tells, it's not Madge's book, this gives you a view of my life, my times, and why I fought and decided to lead a battle against racism in Bristol. Because I was aware the issue of racism wasn't new to Bristol. Bristol was one of the great cities of slavery. 500,000 Africans left in Bristol ships to be shipped over to the Caribbean and the Americas. This one city was able to take 500,000 Africans to the so-called New World. So Bristol has a special duty to stand up against fascism and racism. As I said, it won't go away. Racism doesn't slumber. It only wants to pick on you to help destroy human life as we know it. I want to thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you will also read my book. Thank you.
I just wanted to add that one of the inspirational aspects of the bus boycott was the way that a small group of people came together across racial lines. And I think we should make mention of the role that Tony Benn played. But Tony is now in hospital, I believe. But Tony Benn was incredibly supportive, was he not, as was Sir Larry Constantine, to the campaign, helped to bring it international attention, and also was very supportive about the investigation that I undertook in the 1980s. And I think, we should owe him a debt of gratitude as well.
Yes, absolutely. Tony Benn was very, very valuable. The Bishop of Bristol played a very important part. The Bishop came out and told me privately that he was going to have to attack me because the churches didn't agree with what I was doing. So the bishop came out and said I was a troublemaker. The Transport and General Workers Union, I don't know if he took the cue from the Bishop of Bristol. I'm sure you know the regional secretary at that time. He was giving mainly support to the racism on Bristol buses. I sued the Transport and General Workers Union on the advice of Leary Constantine. Leary, who was a great cricketer, lost his high commissionership for supporting my fight with the Bristol buses. Harold Wilson, who was now giving us support, which was quite surprising, a leader of a major party like Labour Party. Harold Wilson felt able to openly admit he's going to introduce legislation that will start the ending of racism on the buses and more so. So what we did in Bristol didn't just affect Bristol, it was to affect the country and to give the Westminster and the black people of this country rights and protection from racism. So yes, there were a lot of people who were involved. Some of my High Court action against the Transport and General Workers Union was that they went into court, they apologised, and also gave me damages of £500. Frank Cousins was I'm sure some of you know Frank Cousins, was the General Secretary at the time, and he felt very embarrassed that the Transport and General Workers Union should, through their regional secretary, libel the person who was fighting racism. But those days are gone, we moved on, and I hope we'll move on even more so in the next 500 years, or next 50 years. Thank you.
I've just got a few quick announcements. Someone's car, Volvo Silver W985 NTG, is blocking the disabled access, so please move your car. Additionally, for those of you who want to go to the toilet, it's the exit over there and the exit over there. Right, okay. I would also like to thank the trade union branches that sponsored Madge Dresser's book, okay? So the trade unions that supported the book launches were Bristol National Union of Journalists, Bristol Trade Council, Bristol RMT, Bristol National Union of Teachers, Bristol City Unison, University of the West of England to Unison, and the Fulham branches of Unite, Bristol Health, Bristol Finance and Legal, and Bristol General Service, which takes me to my next speaker, Nigel Costley.
Thank you very much. I feel really privileged and honoured to be invited to speak tonight. This is a good occasion to remember and to pay tribute to all those involved, particularly Paul, of course. The struggle that took place in Bristol was fundamental to many things, not least the history of this city. So it's right that we pay tribute, that we congratulate those that were involved, but also we have an obligation to learn, and to particularly learn what went wrong. How come people who should have known better got it so wrong and made the wrong call? And a lot has changed in the 50 years between now and then. Paul's just described some of the worst aspects of 1963. But human nature hasn't fundamentally changed. And I think every generation ends up having to fight the same battles. And we have to learn from history, otherwise we are doomed to repeat it. And so I think we do need to dwell a little on why things went wrong. Those in power will always seek to divide us, no more than this current government, I would argue. The divisions they're trying to drive between those in the public sector versus those in the private, the young versus the old, black versus white, those in work versus those out, the skivers versus scroungers. Their whole rationale is about division. And so our job, and it is a challenge, is to make sure that we defeat the myths that will divide us. Because racism is a powerful force. Prejudice is a powerful and toxic force that lurks under the rocks that will come crawling out if we let them. The rapid rise of Golden Dawn in Greece just shows, when an economy hits the pan, exactly what can happen and how racism can quickly take hold. Now, I'm sure that all of us here are completely confident that had we been there in 1963, we would have swelled Paul's ranks and marched on the bus company. But I think we can't be complacent, can we, about our own workplaces, our families and friends who are given this daily diet from the likes of the Daily Mail and the Express. And it sometimes appears all too convincing. And the rise of UKIP, it looks, if we're not careful, next year's European elections, in this region, UKIP will top the poll. It's frightening stuff, the way that their message is seeping into our politics. And I personally have felt pretty queasy in the last fortnight when the Tories and UKIP have wheeled out black and Asian speakers to tell us how we're being flooded by foreigners. I think that 50 years ago, no doubt good trade unionists ended up on the wrong side. And that how did they not do what was expected of them? Not just in today's standards, but even by those standards. In 1963, the Transport and General Workers Union had quite a few black members, it was reported, especially in companies like Fry's chocolate factories. And the union at the time was campaigning against racism. It had a proud record of internationalism. It was fighting apartheid regime in South Africa. Yet here, Ron Nethercott, the regional secretary, who spoke that we have a lot of coloured members in Bristol, but low-paid bus workers at the time tried to hang on to their overtime rates by keeping people out, by keeping new arrivals out. If there was a vote to have a colour bar amongst the workforce, it was probably done before Nethercott arrived on the scene. But he certainly tried to deny it and cover it up. A guy called Arthur Coxwell of the T&G blamed the employer entirely. He said, the union has no colour bar. The decision not to employ West Indians was made by the bus company alone. The bus workers must have been an important branch of the union. No doubt good working class trade unionists who were doing what they thought they should to protect themselves, but forced to choose between that group of workers and some young upstart, Paul here, Ron Nethercott made the wrong call. He lashed out at the media. He lashed out at the demonstrating students who marched on the bus company, called them sincere but misinformed. He tried to undermine Paul by using Bill Smith, who was the chair of the Bristol West Indian Association, who was also a Transport and General Workers Union member. And in the shameful outburst that we've just heard about, he slandered Paul. He picked a fight that he probably regretted and has regretted ever since. But he was in a corner, and I think fairly quickly realised he was in a corner, and the Bristol trade union activists generally supported the boycott. Perhaps not as vocally as I think they should have done, but at the May Day rally that was held in 1963 in Eastwell Park, speakers were critical of the position that the Transport and General Workers Union were taking. There were reports of T&G speakers being heckled and barracked, and there was a motion passed reaffirming our belief in the brotherhood of man regardless of race, colour or creed. It was fairly clear that the movement, I think, of activists in Bristol didn't support what was going on and very much regretted the failure of the T&G to challenge the bar. Paul has just spoken how he won the support of Tony Benn and Harold Wilson, and I think that the National Union realised that Nethercott was an embarrassment and out of line. And although talks did drag on, eventually on the same day as the great speech by Martin Luther King, the bus boycott had won and the bar was lifted, and Raghubar Singh was recruited as the first non-white bus company. That experience has helped the trade union movement. It helped the cause for legislation, and Harold Wilson's intervention here in particular, when he was elected as Prime Minister, it was this experience in Bristol that propelled him to introducing the first Race Relations Act. And unions have got better, we're going to hear in a moment. Unions have got much, much better at organising all workers and have a proud record of championing equalities and diversity. So I don't think we can be complacent, and we can do certainly a lot better. But we have fought racism at work, opposed discrimination. And black workers today are paid more in unionised workplaces than black workers who are not in unions. They get better treatment. There is less discrimination and unfair treatment where unions are organised. Of course, the Transport and General Workers went on to elect the first black General Secretary, Bill Morris, and have a proud record. And I'm delighted we, the TUC, have just a few weeks ago elected Mohammed Taj from Bradford, a bus driver, and he will make a great president for this next year. But, and of course there is a big but, as we all know, there is still racism and discrimination out there. Half of young black people are unemployed. The number of black youngsters getting apprenticeships are still well below white counterparts. There is still discrimination on the grounds of pay. People on higher skills are still lower paid as a result of their colour. And the EDL are on the march, and UAF pay tribute to the work that they do in combating the rise of the far right. But it's also UKIP we need to challenge, that more subtle and insidious discrimination and racism that we've got to combat. So I'll just finish. We have got to take on the myths. We have got to keep arguing in our workplaces. Actually, migrants bring more than they ever take. They pay more in taxes than they ever take in terms of benefits. The reason we don't have enough houses is we haven't built enough houses, particularly affordable ones. They're not taking our jobs. We owe it to people to reach out in unity to protect wages and conditions for all workers and not be divided on any grounds, particularly on grounds of race. So the fight has to go on. We learn the lessons of the bus boycott. We pay tribute to those who were involved and take our hats off to them, but we also have to take on the mantle of that time and do it all again if we have to. Thank you.
Okay, so we've heard a little bit from Paul Stevenson already, and it would be lovely if Roy Hackett can say a little bit as well.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You got to excuse my voice. I had a dog's throat. However, I would say welcome to you. I'm glad that you're here, and I'm so pleased to see some younger people as well, because the thing about it, 50 years ago was a long time. And the younger people today might know about it. But matter of fact, I spoke to people 20 years ago who was born in school here in Bristol. And this particular person I spoke to was 44 years old. And they said they had never heard of it. I said, where were you born? He said, in Stapleton Road, Russell Avenue. I said, it was the heart of the business. However, I come here to talk about what happened. The Bristol we are living in today was not the kind of Bristol 50 years ago. I personally had to sleep in a doorway in Ashley Road, just up the road here, one night, and a white person gave me an overcoat, and I will ever be thankful for that. However, my march to Bristol is a long one. I came to Bristol to work for Taylor Woodrow from Notting Hill to build Hinkley Point Power Station. I was a T-boy. But in 1963, when the bus issued, I was 35 years old. So 50 years on top of that 35 brings me last week to 85 years old. Therefore, I am very proud to see that maybe what we have done, Paul, Guy, and myself, and those that gone along like the late Owen Henry, the late Drummonds, Bill Smith, and the only black Lord Mayor we had, well, the first black Lord Mayor we had, and all these people fought very hard. I know a lot of people won't accept that we done something right, because we were really harassed, but not physically. Verbally, we were put right onto the ground as if we never exist. But I don't regret what I have done. And as I have told my children, that what we've done, we want our great-grandchildren to be free to choose what they wanted. I don't know how many Caribbean people here that born in Jamaica or in the Caribbean. But in the Caribbean, I couldn't own, as a Jamaican passport. I must have a British passport, born in Jamaica. And I think that was bad. And there's a lot of things that was bad. But we did not have the power to change it. Don't care how much we tried. But I'm so pleased I'm here to tell you about what happened. The union was part of it. The thing about it is, I joined the union in 1957. This issue came up 1963. I was a holder of the union in my hand. At the time, I was working for St. Anne's Board Mill, one of the biggest employer around here, apart from the Cadbury. And I worked there. I was the first black foreman ever employed by Imperial Tobacco Company. And I'm going to give you a short story about that. I sacked one of the workers on Christmas Eve. And he said, I'm going to get you. But the reason why he couldn't get me was he was working there 10 years before I get there. And he told me a story. He said, my sister worked in a hospital here in Bristol, and a nurse, a black nurse, sacked her because she was a cleaner, and the nurse said, take that up. And she said, take it up yourself. And the nurse went to the higher quarters, and they sacked her. But they blamed the black nurse. But in my job as a foreman, 52 people I got to find a job for every day on my shift, 8-hour shift. On Christmas Eve, I was to sack the bloke, but he had sacked himself before I even touched him. It was the rule, union rule as well, Transport and General Workers Union rule. It was a family-orientated firm. It was very good up to his workers. And whenever you were out ill, even for 2 days, when you're coming back, you should bring a doctor's certificate, but also you should phone the night before to say, I'm coming back tomorrow. The day he came was Christmas Eve, because if he didn't come Christmas Eve, he would lose his Christmas money. When he came in, he went on his job, and I came out and said to the lad, you, go up on the green. They said, why? I said, because I say so. He said, well, Eddie is up there. I said, you go up there and send Eddie down. And I said to Eddie, you got to go home. I didn't tell him I sacrificed. You got to go home. He said, why? I said, you break the rule. You got to go home. I'll take you to the higher one, and tomorrow, He went to the union, and the union told him, you were wrong. Something happened that I never thought. If I didn't send him home, the other 51 people said they would go on strike because he broke the rule. But most of the other people were Welsh and Irish. And they said, if you didn't sack that Englishman, we would come out on strike. And that is my story and the end of it. And thank you very much for listening. Okay?
We're now going to hear a little bit from Guy Bailey.
Good evening, everyone. I don't know if you've been watching the slides, but there's a picture of Guy Bailey up there. There's one of him. But the one I'm speaking about is the one where I was wearing glasses. Now, you can tell that I was only a boy at that time. But the Bristol Bus Boycott had made me into a man. Because, had it not been for that, I wouldn't have grown up as fast as I had during those times. Now, the reason why the Bristol Bus Boycott took place was because they had refused from employing black people on the buses. Now, as I said in those days, they were advertising in the evening paper nearly every day how much they wanted conductors and bus drivers. Now, as a young lad I was a boys' brigade attending the youth club in Baptist Mills. And Paul Stevenson was a godsend to Bristol at the time because he was employed by the local authority to work in this area with the young black young people. This allows him to start some educational classes for which I was one of the students at the time. And I believe Paul knew more than I do, or more than the young people did, about the color bar issue, because I wasn't aware of color bar until I came to this country. I know I come from an island in Jamaica where there are different standards and different ways of living, but never used to people saying that you can't sit here or you can't sit there because you're black. And this was what was happening here. Now then, Paul saw that there was a chance of getting an interview for someone like myself on the buses. Little did I know that he had more than that up his sleeves, because he was going to take them on head on. Arrangements were made for an interview. The day of the interview, I remember clearly, it was going to be 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Paul phoned up before I went for the interview just to confirm that the interview was going to take place and who it was. But of course, Paul, I didn't think they knew Paul was a black person. They certainly didn't know I was a black person because of my name, Guy Bailey. So when I turned up for the interview on the day, apparently the receptionist simply was shocked. That's the nearest I can get to it. She was shocked. She looked at me and she said, "Can I help?" Something to that effect. I said, "I'm here for an interview." And she says, "I don't think so." "No." I said, "Yes." She said, "We're expecting a Guy Bailey." And then I said, "I am Guy Bailey." And she said, "Oh." However, she went to the manager, obviously, and said, "The 2 o'clock appointment is here, and he's black." So, with that, he told her to tell me that there was no more vacancy. Yet, an hour before, there was plenty of vacancy. And I wasn't offered an interview because he did simply say that if he offered me an interview, he would be and he had to employ me, he would be displeasing his bus crews. So with that, I stick my tails between my legs and I went. On the evening of class, Paul was there, and we obviously discussed the situation. And I remember Paul pacing up and down in the classroom, how we're going to deal with this situation. And at the end of the day, he decided that he'll have to contact the manager of the bus company and discuss it. Well, I don't think he was interested at all, because he now knew that Paul was black. He knew I was black, and he knew he didn't want any black people on the buses. So obviously, that was it. But Paul went on and tried to do as much as he could at the time to get the thing discussed, but he wouldn't. However, I remember we had to advise Paul got, and that we had to check with the union. I was a member of the union at the time, because where I worked as a young teenager, you had to belong to the Transport and General Workers Union at the time. There were many members of the organization, the Bristol West Indian Parent and Friend Association, who were working in different places and were members of the Transport and General Workers Union, so there was no problem there. The Transport and General Workers Union has a responsibility to support their members, but in this case, they weren't doing that. Paul decided that we were going to go to the local office in, where is the office in town? Yeah, the office in town. And that building, I can remember we used to use it as, black people used to use that building to have events. We used to use it for anniversary, independent functions, and yet the union didn't want to support us in our endeavor to gain access and working on the buses. It all kicks off from there, and for approximately 3 months, there was something happening. I wasn't very involved with the technicality of the union and the issues, but certainly Paul was, and he drives that. And the West Indian Parent and Friend Association were organized by people like Roy, Owen Henry, and others to mobilize the community. And let me say, and I think it's said already, that the local community did support us, especially local white people. They were there, they support us, and at the end of it, Anthony Wedgwood Benn was also involved. Paul Stevenson, through Anthony Wedgwood Benn, they mobilized and got the support of the university students and organized a march through the city. If you know, City Road is just along here, and the march starts here, and it starts right and goes through, past the bus station, down to Transport House, and that's how it all happens. Now then, in those days, it was color bar. After 1963, it becomes racism, and the first Race Relation Act came about through that process. Today, people want to forget about racism and shove it under the carpet, and people more talk about diversity these days. But it's not. It's still racism. And every one of us is suffering from it. And until such time as we get the local authorities, the education authorities, to start using these historical period to teach the young people about what had happened, especially over the last 50 years, young people will still be very ignorant of the issues, because learning starts at the age when they're in school, and that's the time that they need to know all about these issues. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for listening to my part, because lots of other parts I could talk about, but Paul and Roy have already spoken about it, so it's no point going over those things. Thank you very much for being here.
The next speaker that we have is a Unite speaker. Her name's Rita Joyner.
I'd like to thank you on behalf of Unite for inviting me here today. I actually grew up with yourself. My dad was part of the Western Association, so I'd attended lots of, when I was growing up, lots of different venues, especially around the cricket, with a lot of Roy and Paul, and even now today I often see Paul in my local area when we go shopping, don't we, Paul? I grew up in Bristol. I came to Bristol when I was 10 years old, and my parents actually came a bit like, especially, they came along and just like Guy over here to actually work. Although my dad didn't go on the buses, he actually went into the building trade. It was very difficult those times, but I remember when I first got my first job working for, then it was Bristol Royal Infirmary, both my parents said to me, you must belong to a union. So as soon as I got the job, then I signed on and became a union member. So all my working life, I've been part of, was then MSF, which was Manufacturing Union, then it became Amicus, and now it's become Unite. So I was always part of a union, and it's been difficult, and it still is difficult for lots of workers in the workplace. I'm predominantly based in health, and although with the buses and the public sector, health workers are still experiencing racism. They're still experiencing promotion chances. They're experiencing all the things that we experienced in the 1960s. I think the difference is now people challenge those things, and within Unite we challenge in any equity in the workplace, and within the hospitals we've got a forum which could challenge those areas. And I want to be very positive and move on and make sure that the unions, that we must use the unions, all members, and we must not forget the legacy of these three men here who worked so hard to make sure that all workers have a right in the workplace. But Unite's gone a bit further now recently. We've actually been looking at our community. We've actually got community membership. We don't just stay in the workplace, we come out in the communities. We've been doing work with the schools and talking with school children between the ages of 16 onwards, looking at what union is about and for when they move into the workplace. And I think I do agree with all of you. We need to still keep educating our young people and involving our young people and letting them know what was happening in the past, what's happening now, and what they want to have a vision for the future. And my vision for the future for a lot of our workers in the workplace is to not have, like for instance in University Hospitals Bristol, a board that, our executive board, is still just all white faces. And that to me is not right. We need to have more black people on boards. We need to have more black people on senior places and moving up. And then also within our union, we need to be having more black and ethnic minorities throughout the whole union, not just in certain areas. And my dream for, as Martin Luther said, is having a level playing field. And that's what, in the workplace, we still haven't got. We still haven't got that in unions. But I really do believe in the coming year, in the future, that will happen. But we mustn't forget what they've actually laid down, the foundation. My father and Guy and Paul and Roy, all those have laid down a real good platform for us to move on from. And for definitely unions, and all the big unions struggle sometimes with how we make sure there's level playing field. But I really do think in the future we'll have equality will be there to prevail. And again, I want to thank the three of them for actually making my life quite rich, and also my family. And we will, I think majority of black people know their history. And being Black History Month, again, within our trust, we've got a day which our Black and Ethnic Minority Forum is going to be spending days there. So again, I'll hope you take some of the booklets to that. So we've actually embedded that in organizations. I think all the big organizations should have some of those booklets as well, so people know where they're coming from. So Unite would just like to thank us for inviting us here. And as I said, for Unite, we're really optimistic about the future and actually developing black and ethnic minorities within our union. And I thank you very much.
Okay, so we're just going to go on a 10-minute break, and then we're going to reconvene at 8:50. Okay, so a 10-minute break, so it gives you enough opportunity to quickly go to the toilet and also eat some food, and also go to the book stand as well. Okay, and the bar will be open later on at 10:30, so if you want to get a drink then, that's the time to get the drink. Sorry? No, I'm saying at 10:30, that's when they go and have a drink. Some people are still standing. Right, okay, there are some important announcements that we need to make, okay? So, Madge Dresser needs to quickly make an announcement.
Some of you will have noticed the poster that's going around about the talk Women's Slavery and Resistance in the Caribbean. Somehow, I did have the time on it, but it fell off when we did the IT on it. It's at 6 p.m., so if you've got a poster there and you're interested in going, it's by Bernard Moit, who's from Virginia Commonwealth University. He's Antiguan, and he was head of history there, and he's a really great speaker. So do come to the M Shed on the 17th. It's free at 6 p.m. at the M Shed on the 17th of October. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have some more speakers. And with regards to the speakers, it is important that we take action with regards to the EDL and as well as the British National Party as well. So there are going to be a number of different events that are going to be happening. Martin Upchurch is going to be talking a bit about the events that are going to be happening that you can volunteer to. And also we're going to have Wayman Bennett speaking with regards to Unite Against Fascism, to which I am a proud member.
I want to say I'm very proud to be sitting with people that have made the stand that they did and changed history. And somebody once wrote that when people change history, it's never written down or recorded. When people actually do it themselves, the history for our history isn't recorded or used because it's a guide to how we fight today. And I think, I think it's really important. My father was in the British Army and he was based in the Gloucestershire Regiment, and he came to Bristol because of the boycott that took place. And my uncle was the convener of Westbourne Bus Garage, and he always told us about this. So it was like, it's almost like Dad putting the question is a question of resistance against inequality that changes things. And the reason why it's important is because I want to give a quote from Martin Luther King. He said, "The ultimate measure of a human is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The true neighbour will risk his position, his prestige, and even his life for the welfare of others." And really, the real question is, the people that fought to change what happened then changed so that other people could grow up differently. And I want to say that Paul said, he made this statement, he said, "Racism never dies, it simply slumbers." And sometimes I think it changes its form. And I realised why it's important to stand up against that. The first time I saw racism in school, but the first time I really got expelled was singing The Fields of Athenry with my friend, Derek Pigram from Ireland. And at the poem, they were prepared to say you were black and equal, but they weren't prepared for a black and an Irish kid to sit up and sing The Fields of Athenry at our assembly at the time of the so-called troubles in this country. They found that disgusting. And I think it was because they had that position. Yeah, I was sent out. I said, "Go home." And I said, I realised that's the best way of getting out of school. But the point about it was, they did have that, no black, no Irish, no dogs. And actually what it tells you about oppression is the way it's divided and used to rule. And today, I tell you something, when you see the question of the way that Muslim women are treated, right? If you want to understand the fastest growing level of racist attacks in this country are on Muslim women, right? Now, and it's important that we say that, because when racism, it's a question of the people that stand, you have to stand up when other people are attacked. And I think the reason why you have to stand up is because it opens the door for other attacks. You see, when you hear Jeremy Hunt say, "I'm worried about people wearing a niqab or a veil," what I have to say about that is you have to stand back and think. We had the colour bar before. Now we're having somebody saying, if a nurse comes to me and they're wearing something on their head, it's a problem. And I believe that is racism today. And we have to turn around and we have to fight it. You see, Islamophobia is opening up the same door to what happened before, and we have to understand it, because they're not coming forward and saying, "I'm stopping you because you're black." They turn around and saying, "What we're worried about Muslims in society," and it's poisoning our society. The EDL, when they marched, the government original Home Office said they were a human rights organisation. That's what they said. They're a human rights organisation. Human rights organisations that go burning down Muslim centres, as they did inside Muswell Hill. And I believe we are absolutely right. One of my proudest moments was standing in Bristol when people told people not to come out and stand and say the EDL aren't welcome here. And people stood in their hundreds and said they're not welcome here. I think we should do that every single time, because an attack on one group always leads to an attack on everybody else. And the question about how we fight is quite important. How did people resist the boycott? They came together collectively and said that you shouldn't accept what was going on. And one of the best things that happened last week was being with 50,000 people marching in Manchester, and you looked around, and when I looked around, it looked like this room. But when you listen to the way that people say there's a problem with multiculturalism, these are the people that work inside the National Health Service. Like my mother came as a nurse. And I think one of the things about the growth of fascism now, why it's dangerous, is because when the people talk about, what's interesting is I was listening to them, they talked about going for different jobs, didn't they? I'm going to be a bus driver. I'm going to go and work inside Cadbury's. I'm going to go and do that. And I was thinking, where was that? Because it doesn't happen now, does it? One of the problems we've got is that people say, when they're looking for work, where are they going to go? And then what do they say? They say, who's to blame? I don't know if people have noticed, but in London, they've been sending round these vans. In Tottenham, it comes round, and it's got a picture of somebody from Jamaica saying, go home. Right? And it says, if you're an illegal immigrant, go home. In Walthamstow, it's got pictures of people that look like they're from Southeast Asia, and it says, go home. Now, I'm sorry, right? Why are they putting those vans around now? I actually believe that is increasing the level of racism in our society. Those vans, the only people who should go home, maybe I'm stepping out the remit of UAF, is people like, I mean, what does David Cameron know about multiculturalism? I mean, I know I'm told he's gone to Eton, but what difference, how is that multiculturalism? These people are attacking it, and I think one of the things we have to understand is when you look across, I've been invited to 2 places this weekend. One is in Greece, to the memorial of a rapper that was murdered by Golden Dawn. And I think it's important. I said I'm going to go. And the reason why I'm going to go is because he came here when the BNP were growing and went to Trafalgar Square for a Love Music Hate Racism gig and spoke out. And I think it's important that we understand who these people are. They are Nazis. They are attempting to break our society, and we've got every right to stand out against it. The other place I'm going is to Oslo, because a man called Breivik, who was inspired by the English Defence League to go around and murder people. This is fascism living today, and that's the reason why it's important. These meetings are important, that we make a stand to say where those people are. And tradition matters. When they say that we have to fight each other, I think the most important is the thing is to say, actually, they're trying to target. They're trying to target. And the truth is, we can win. I stood in a place called Tower Hamlets, where the EDL said we're going to follow the same route as Mosley, right, up and attack the East London Mosque. And you know what happened? 5,000 of us stood in the way. And guess what happened? The police said, we can't take them that way. I know why they couldn't take them that way, because we were standing there, right? And when people say, stay at home, don't do anything, right, they're absolutely wrong. It wasn't, by the way, the people standing there were, you know, everybody standing there, but there were women, men, young people. It wasn't great, big, strong people that fought them off. It was the size and numbers and our collectivity and the unity that broke these people. And we have to do that every time the EDL come out onto the streets. We have to make sure that we resist them. And that's the reason why I think it's important to stand. And when we're attacked, when people say that there's not enough jobs, there's not enough houses, there's not enough that, and actually what you have to do is attack your neighbour, we have to remember what happened here in Bristol, when people turned around and said that everybody's got the right to be able to drive and ride on a bus and be treated equally. The truth is we have to resist. And I think if we resist, we've got a better chance of being able to make sure that we shape the future. Because if we don't shape the future, we have the chance of revisiting the past. And I'll end up on this finally. We're taking a group of young people to Auschwitz. And we'll take them to Auschwitz so that they remember the past. Because if you don't remember the past, you're doomed to repeat what happened. And our slogan is never again, because they murdered millions of Jewish people, socialists, trade unionists, and I think that happened in the 1930s because when they first came for those people, people didn't speak out, and we have to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself. So all our history comes together, all our training comes together, but we have to make sure we shape the future so that those things don't happen, but also that we have a hope in the future, that we get rid of racism, sexism, homophobia. The truth is, when people say, I have a dream, I do want a level playing field. It's true. But part of the leveling of the playing field is making sure we own the field. Right? Everybody owns the field and has a right to plough and live and grow. I'm being looked at now to shut up, right? And I will shut up. No, oh, sorry. But I do have to say that when people say, I have a dream, a man called W. Du Bois said that the 20th century will be the question of the colour bar and how to overcome it. We've partially overcome it with a fight against apartheid, whatever it is, and racism. Racism has not gone away. But I do believe in the 21st century, we have to start to challenge some of the conditions, the people like UKIP. I mean, how can somebody, Nigel Farage is a banker. You know what rhymes with banker, right? He's a banker telling us that he has an answer to the crisis and that the question is to blame migrants that are coming. This is a man who turned around and said the whole of the Bulgarian people are coming to arrive in London
because it's so great. When he went there and asked people on the street, are you coming to London? They said no. They said no. He said that 4 million people are coming to Britain. That is the population of the area of the people that live there. But he's put on television and told that he's the leader of what's happening. He's going to stand in the southwest and try and establish. I think we have to stand up to UKIP. We have to kick the BNP out. We have to stop the EDL from marching. And we have to fight against racism and division. And we have to stand up against Islamophobia, sexism, homophobia, racism. We have to stand up together and make sure we defeat it, because that's what will change the future. I'm losing my words. What's going on with me? I didn't used to do this. It's late nights, right? But we have to make sure we fight the racism of the past and win the future, so for future generations, make sure that we can have a better society. And I'll stop there.
I just quickly want to use this opportunity. Martin doesn't know that I'm going to do this, but anyhow. I'm just going to quickly use this opportunity to just say thank you very much for, with regards to all the hard work that Martin has done in organising it and also executing this event today. Martin has a few words to say with regards to action that we need to take.
Thank you, Lisa. I wasn't expecting that, so thank you very much. We started this event really as a celebration of the bus boycott, and I think it's rapidly become a celebration of unity, because I see that around the hall tonight. The second thing I think about the bus boycott is that it represented 50 years ago a pulse of civil rights. As I've been sort of looking more and more at it, you realize, for example, the influence that the American civil rights movement probably had on Paul's thinking. You know, when he went up onto the Downs and thought, well, how can we break this colour bar in Bristol? And thought of the bus boycotts. It was also interesting, the very day that the T&G voted to end the colour bar, or not support the colour bar in Bristol Omnibus Company, August the 28th, 1963, was the same day that Martin Luther King made his I Have a Dream speech, a few hours later because of time differences in Washington. And I think these connections still exist. This event is actually twinned, I managed to twin it with an event that's taking place in Chicago later this month of a 1963 event, another anniversary event of 200 school children in Chicago that went on strike against segregation in schools and won. And they're having their celebratory event in a couple of weeks' time and have linked with us. But the other thing I think I want to say is that, to pick up where Wayman has been talking, is that there is a challenge to this pulse of civil rights. There is a movement represented by fascism, the BNP, the EDL, that wants to turn the clock back and stop us going forward in unity. And the EDL, for example, of course, who marched here last year, have announced that they're going to march again in Bristol on December the 7th. The excuse they're giving is that there is a building in Stokes Croft, it was last known as Jester's Comedy Club. It's the old cinema. It used to be a Christadelphian church as well. That there's a planning application. It's unclear whether this planning application actually has gone in, but a planning application has gone in to turn it into a Muslim cultural centre. And the EDL have announced a march against that. And I think it's important that we oppose their march and have a counter-demonstration. And we want to begin planning for that counter-demonstration. You must also remember, of course, that after the Woolwich murder in May this year, the EDL rampaged through pubs from Kingswood down to St George. And I mean rampage. They ransacked the St George's Hall pub in St George at the end of their so-called march. It was quite a deliberate process of trying to intimidate the local population. It's how fascism builds, by intimidating people. And we want that sort of thing to stop. We want unity in the community, and we don't want them to divide our communities. So this Saturday in St George, at the entrance to St George's Park at 12 noon, there's a blue plaque there near Aldi, but they've got the blue plaque of Bob Hope. We're going to have a UAF activity where we want to do leafleting and petitioning
against the EDL. And then the following Tuesday, on the 15th, we're calling for a planning meeting to begin our plans of opposition to the EDL marching or demonstrating in Bristol on December the 7th. So I urge you to get involved in that, to prevent this backward step that the fascists are trying to do on the question of civil rights and racism. Finally, and I want obviously you have time for people to have something to say from the floor before we have a drink. Please buy Madge's book. It's reprinted. It's hot off the press. It's £3, and it is on sale here. It's been funded by the trade unions, but we want to get this into schools. We want to get this into trade unions' bulk supplies. And really, as I think Guy was saying, begin to educate younger people about what went on in Bristol. Please also buy Paul's book. I've read it, and it's absolutely fascinating and a unique book. And please also consider joining the UEF. We have a stall at the side there, and we will also be collecting money for our campaign, but also to pay for the hall. So please, Liz, I think, will have an orange bucket. Please try and give generously, because we have to pay for this room and everything else associated with planning the event. But thank you very much for coming. So I'll hand back to Lisa now.
Wayner, yeah. Just about the Holocaust victims, also to mention the Catholics, the Gypsies, and the gays as well. So, yeah, that's what I want to say.
My name is Romanos, from CW, Communication Workers Union, Bristol branch. When one of my colleagues mentioned about this gathering tonight, I asked him for the leaflet to be pasted in my workplace, and he did. Pasted it. As I'm talking to you, it's still there. I make sure it's there. And I try as much as possible to be here tonight for one or two reasons. One is to educate myself about the past and the history. Another thing is to socialize myself. Fortunately for me, the Southwest TUEC and the chairperson, which is presently here, so we are here, and he spoke, Mr. Niger. And I was so impressed to hear the history, particularly from the horse's mouth. That's the people that participated in the event of 1963. And by 1963, I don't think whether my mom has even got married, to talk less of burning me. But
sorry, you've got 1 minute left.
Okay, sorry. And to sum it up, I'm very pleased to hear from them the event that happened, and I'm moved by the speakers that spoke here tonight about things that happen, and it's good to rise up to the occasion as young ones coming up and make sure we resist the kind of racism, fascism in this form, and encourage the young ones, try to educate them the evils that such things portray.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Martin, the lady at the back there.
Hi, I'm from Bristol and I'm Jen. There's another celebration today, and 41 years ago, the Black Panthers were locked up for their resistance to American racism. And for 41 years, some members of the Black Panthers have been locked up in a prison nicknamed Angola. And it's called Angola Prison because it's built on the ruins of a slave plantation. And this gentleman has been released after 41 years living in solitary confinement. And he's been released because he has a terminal illness. There are still some members in there, and Amnesty International is taking up their cases, obviously. That's one point. Last week in Bristol, and I'm very proud of Bristol, we have a terrible history of slavery, but last week in Bristol, there was a conference, SARI was represented, a range of organisations, including LGBT and the Brandon Trust and MIND, the mental health issues, came together to form an organization against hate crime. And there was a big launch. And I wanted to say that because that is an example of the unity that we need to build to work our way against people in the English Defence League. But last time the EDL came to Bristol, the police played an evil role in that it divided people. They said to people from the Muslim mosques and the Muslim leading committee, the Mosque Council, that they shouldn't come out and oppose the EDL, but they should have a separate cultural event. And they won. And the police are out to divide us because they can manage us better. But on the day when we oppose the EDL, we want everybody there. We want everybody who's opposed to hate crimes, and we don't want to allow the police to divide us. And just a personal story. Many years ago, I was secretary of the Anti-Nazi League in Nottingham. I never thought I'd have to be doing UAF work again, but I am, and I'll keep going. And these Nazis, in those days...
Sorry, you've got 30 seconds.
They threw petrol bombs at the tree in front of my house. They did parcels of shit through my door and regularly rang me up at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and threatened my life. I don't tell that story for anything other than it's an important story because it happens to white people. White people who oppose racists will also be under attack. And that's why it's even more important that black and white unite and fight, men and women, gay and straight. We need to oppose this racism wherever we are. And I do hope that we're all strong and we build very strongly for the UAF demonstration in December against the EDL.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Ravi John. I'm the director of PACS and also the program director for AfriFest, which is happening this Friday and Saturday. It's been great knowing these three people who are very instrumental. I've had the opportunity to work with our big boss, my daddy, and of course also Guy and the other people. These people are, as we look in other parts of the world, these people are history, they are legend. How much, as a teacher, how much is he embedded in our curriculum, in the school curriculum? How much? I know we've been doing work when Paul, we were together as chairman for the organization that we were working. We tried to put a book together. But colonialism have gone. Neo-colonialism still remain. The continuous marginalization, undermining, backstabbing, it continues. And even black organization against ourselves. I cannot imagine black organization that we are meant to work together, support one another, partnership, still dividing, undermining. It's becoming very serious now, and this we're going to take the bull by the horn, right? And there are key individuals also in the community, even though they are black, but they are not black. And they seize themselves, and I want to use this opportunity as African. Some of our Jamaican brothers and sisters refuse to work and undermine.
Sorry, you've got 1 minute left.
We are doing AfriFest, which is a festival of arts, culture, and heritage, which is every year to recognize and support black development, culture, music, dance. And it's happening this Saturday, Friday at Westbury upon Trim, and Saturday here at Malcolm X starting from 12 o'clock. The theme for this year is Bridging the Gap, Strengthening Our Community. A tribute to Nelson Mandela and Marcus Garvey. Thank you.
Hi, yeah. Last Friday I was in St George, where the EDL rampaged earlier in the year, campaigning around the bedroom tax. People were stopping and chatting, signing the petition. One older woman signed the petition, started talking about the government, and I said, "Oh, you know, what do you think then of the kind of current situation that's led to bedroom tax being brought in?" I tell you who I would vote for, the person that stops the immigrants coming into the country. And you'll just see your heads in your hands because of somebody who recognises an attack on ordinary people in terms of the benefits, but then the conclusion that was drawn is that it's the immigrants' fault. And I think, as well as marching on the street, I think, you know, as a member of UAF myself, you have to take on the arguments on a one-to-one basis wherever you are as well. And they do spring up when you least expect them, be that in your workplace, colleges, or wherever. So, I mean, my experience of being a member of UAF has included, you know, leaflets that we put out when BNP was standing in Lawrence Hill. And it's things like, you know, it's a simple leaflet. It explains the truth about who these people are, because the things that this woman was saying to me was a complete diatribe of Daily Mail headlines, or Daily Hell as it should be known. It was literally, there are whatever many thousand Bulgarians that are going to get off boats, which we thought we could go down the route of explaining that Bulgaria's landlocked, but we won't do that. You know, it was just a complete list of things, like headlines that people see, and unless we actually have those one-to-one discussions with people and raise it through our unions, in our workplaces, with our mates down the pub that we think all agree with us, but, you know, sometimes they come out with stuff, then actually, you know, it's even harder then to get people on the street to march when they really need to.
Yeah, just a couple, three points really that I wanted to make. First is, as everybody else here, I'm in awe of the people that took part in the boycott, and was really interested to hear their stories. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing was that I think one of the things that's come out of tonight and comes up all the time really is that we need to do more work to understand the relationship between capitalism and racism, class and racism. And until we do that, I think we won't really sort of solve either of those issues, because wherever capitalism exists, as long as it exists, racism will also exist, because it's that way round. Capitalism uses racism and sexism and all the other minorities, or, you know, oppressed minorities, to divide society. So. But not everyone's going to agree with that, and I'm a supporter of Workers' Power, a Trotskyist organisation. I was involved in anti-fascist work in the 1990s, and did a lot of work during that time. So that's my analysis is coming from that. Out of interest, Workers' Power has also done a lot of analysis of work of the history of the American Civil Rights Movement, and there's a whole variety of. There's Black Panthers, there was Trotskyist, black civil rights organisations, one in particular called MOVE, that was bombed by the CIA. It's a whole sort of plethora of, you know, really interesting historical detail around that period. Just finally, in terms of the present, I was also at the I was also involved in the community meeting that took place before the EDL march. And I also went on the EDL march recently. I can't remember what it was. Was it in March recently, April this year? And whilst
sorry, you've got 30 seconds.
I agree with most of the points that have been made so far. I would say that if we're preparing early in advance, and I think it's really important to say that there was work done by the police to alienate the Muslim community. And basically, I was at the meeting where they had to walk out, they had to go to a funeral, but they didn't engage with people that were wanting to confront the EDL because they were intimidated by the police. And that was a major blow. So we need to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. But we also, on the actual march, because there was a bit of an obsession about having a kind of static protest at Castle Park, that the police were able to
make sure that we can get as many speakers as possible
just
from the floor.
Tiny.
You've literally got two seconds, and that's it.
They were able to pin people into that area, and there were many opportunities, and I was there to physically confront, and to verbally confront the fascists.
Thank you for your contribution.
At many points.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm from Bristol UAF, and I did help with mobilisation last July. And one of the things that we need to do when they're coming back in the 7th is actually mobilise in a far bigger way and a far broader way than we did the last time. Last time was a success, but I think it could be even better. So it's a plea for people to come and sign up at the stall, give their details, because we need the details for the planning meeting. And to be honest, is when Nigel touches on UKIP, with this mobilisation, we get to challenge by trying to mobilise for it the ideas of UKIP. And to tell you one of the kind of horror stories of Bristol in terms of UKIP is that UE has the first UKIP society for a student union in the country. And they also got more sign-ups to their society than any other political society at their Freshers' Fair. So we have to really challenge this, and so this is also a way of actually going into the university campuses and also the FE colleges, the schools, because to be honest, we have to challenge this at a lot younger age than we've ever done before. So that's one of the things that we're going to have to do now as well. So if people could come and volunteer, because we need a lot of help to do this mobilisation, and it would be much grateful if people could come and sign up at the stall or come to speak to me after. Thanks.
Okay, I just would like to quickly use this opportunity to say that it will be one... Oh, sorry, does someone want to speak? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you for all the speakers who's been extremely inspiring. But I just want to touch on a point on the hijab. I remember from when I went to school up until now, I struggle with the hijab I wear. I remember when we were in the toilet or in class on our own, water would be on our head. And up until now, it's hardly to say if I go to a senior chapel or even to university and places, that my hijab would always be an issue. So if one group is being targeted, every group will be targeted. I think we need to be very united, and I'm really glad that the hijab has been mentioned, because it's been something that I really struggle to come to terms with. It's my identity, but it has to be accepted, but I feel I haven't been accepted. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Noura, and sorry, I didn't realise that you wanted to speak. I just quickly want to use this opportunity to say that to show that we are united and to show that we like diversity and multiculturalism, there will be a reggae disco later on, so if you want to boogie, that will be good. I would also like to use this opportunity to just say thank you to the speakers, and I would also like to use the opportunity to say thank you to the audience for coming and to actually listen to the speakers. And also I would like to say thank you to Pete, the camera guy, and also Pete who's done wonderful food, and also the students who also served the food from City of Bristol College and Fairfield School as well.